Bernard Tobin here at the Southwest Ag Conference, joined by Shannon Osbourne from South Dakota, a research agronomist from the USDA. Hey, thanks for stopping by.
Thanks for having me.
Now, one of the things that brings you to Canada for SWAC is to talk about soil organic matter and how we build organic matter in our soils. And you just finished your presentation, and you had 5 key sort of recommendations. Run us through those quickly.
So there's several ways to build organic matter in your production system, but I kind of think of there's 5 that you can implement with it as best management practices. And there are these 5. I don't think that you have to implement all 5 of them at once. I think any of them that you can implement on your farm in your production system will help you improve organic matter. And so it's not like you have to do all of them to improve organic matter. You can choose 1 or 2 or choose those that fit best within your system. And so first and foremost, I think crop diversity. How do we get crop diversity on the landscape? How do we increase the number of crops that we grow, the types of crops that we grow, and that's through rotations. And so all of those different types of crops have different root exudates that they exudate in the soil that are important to soil microbiology, and that's important to building soil organic matter. And so it's really feeding the system. So adding diversity to your crop rotation is one way of doing that. Cover crops are very important. Cover crops help to put something on the soil when a crop would not be there. Cover crops are also a very good way to add diversity to your system. If you're in a corn soybean rotation that's not very diverse, when you plant a cover crop that's totally different, and that can help you with that diversity situation. Reduce tillage. So I mean that kind of
speaks for itself.
Any tillage pass that you can eliminate is going to help you build that soil organic matter. Another one is organic amendments. If you have access to any type of compost, to manure, any of those types of inorganic things obviously are going to help build organic matter. And then if, the other way, is converting back to a perennial system, grasses. It's not always possible, but maybe there's some areas on your farm that are highly erodible or very low production, and maybe, converting those back to grasses would be a way of doing that.
Now, one of the things you talked about was, the fact that in your presentation, high organic matter is so good for everything, right? It's soil health. It's it increases your soil's ability to absorb water, and there's so many good things that you can do by adding organic matter. But you've been working on this many years now. We're getting people talking about organic matter and cover crops, but it's a slow build. Question for you is, why is it so slow? The story is so great, it makes so much sense, but it's just not happening fast enough.
Well, there's I think there's a lot of reasons why it's not happening fast enough, and there's a lot of factors that aren't necessarily in the control of the producer. This is a great conference in that it's bringing a lot of ideas to producers of how they can implement change on their current production system. But just your system as a whole, maybe you don't have the equipment to diversify, you don't have the knowledge to grow those different types of crops because they're a totally different management system, and adding cover crop to your system adds an extra dimension of management. You can't just plant a cover crop and forget about it. You really have to plan what it is that you're planting, the species that you are going to choose, and how you're managing it so that it doesn't have a negative impact on the following crop. And so there's a number of those reasons why people are reluctant to adopt some of these practices. Change is hard. Change takes time. And these are the type of conferences that help implement that change.
So how do we get to that next step? I mean, you talked about, conferences like this, talking, working with farmers, programs. How do we make that next step?
So I think that next step comes from scientists working one-on-one with producers who are already implementing those changes and seeing the effects that they're having, and us scientifically explaining what those mechanisms are that are implementing the change. There's a whole lot of talk right now about soil health, how do we measure it?
Yeah.
And what do those measurements mean? And so we as scientists are spending a lot of time just on those specific things. How do we measure soil health? Organic matter is, a key component of that. And there's all kinds of new techniques now that can help us measure what that is. But it's that interaction. It's the interaction between the scientists and the producers to implement that change. And the producers can be a very good source of implementing change by them talking about the things that they're seeing on their farm by implementing these systems.
You talked yesterday a couple of things. You talked about relevant research, doing relevant research. I know you've done a lot of it, but I mean, where do you go with your research?
So we've been doing research for the last 15 years on cover crops. It went from the entire reason I started cover crop research 15 years ago was because where I live in South Dakota, we get a lot of spring rains, and people were saying they couldn't adopt no-till because we get too much moisture in the spring, and I can't get out and plant my corn in a timely manner. So that was very simple-minded, but yet as we have grown and as technologies have come about, we've realized the importance of soil microorganisms and what they're doing. We know now how to measure them. We know a lot more information about who they are. So now it's about how can we get our soil to work for us, and how can we treat it in such a way that it will work for us and it will build that soil organic matter, and then all of those nutrient cycling, water infiltration, compaction, all of those come along with it.
Well, Shannon, hey, thanks for taking the time. You've been doing some great work.
Thank you.
Keep it up. Got a little bit more to go, eh?
Yes, there's always more to do.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.